Imagine this: a place that is supposed to be silent, dead, unmoving, untouched. A continent made of ice older than civilization, older than recorded memory, older than most species walking the planet. And yet underneath that cold stillness, something is beating. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally. Heat pulses traveling beneath the ice, moving in waves, as if something enormous and ancient is breathing. Scientists first noticed it accidentally. Satellite thermal scans revealed an anomaly, a warmth that appeared, disappeared, and returned again in perfectly timed intervals. At first, they assumed equipment malfunction, then atmospheric distortion, then volcanic activity. But volcanic activity does not follow rhythm. It does not repeat with precision. Yet, this heat signature does. A pulse every 48 minutes and 19 seconds. For months, then years. No randomness. No decay. No geological explanation. Something under Antarctica was cycling through waves of energy like a living organism. Think about that. The coldest place on Earth, the place we call lifeless, is showing a biological pattern. But this pulse doesn't behave like any known creature. It is too vast, too synchronized, too measured. It stretches across the entire continent. As though the ice isn't covering a landscape, but skin. As though Antarctica is a single being. A singular organism large enough to reshape continents and erase civilizations. And if this pulse is truly biological, then Antarctica is not a place. It is an entity. Researchers who studied the readings began noticing something unsettling. The pulse wasn't just heat. It was structured. A repeating signal hidden in thermal fluctuation, resembling electrophysiological patterns found in neural tissue. In other words, the heat signature looked like a brain signal, not random warmth, a controlled output. Some called it coincidence, others said it was impossible. But a few whispered a question everyone else was too afraid to say out loud. What if Antarctica is alive? If that idea feels uncomfortable, good, because it should be. For centuries, humans assumed they were the highest form of biological intelligence on Earth. But what if Earth already birthed something far older, more patient, more aware? Something that doesn't measure life in decades or centuries, but in epochs. Something that has watched extinction events, continental shifts, cosmic impacts, and human arrogance, and remained silent until now. Why now? Why would the pulse synchronize in the modern era? Some believe it coincides with melting rates. As the ice thins, the pulse becomes stronger, clearer, louder in thermal data. Almost like a heart recovering its freedom after being buried alive. Almost like something once dormant is waking up. One team placed seismic sensors deep into the ice shelf, hoping to isolate the source. But instead of a single hotspot, they found distributed warmth patterns moving like coordinated muscle fibers, sometimes converging, sometimes separating, but always following the same synchronized rhythm. A stated message repeated in biological code. When the researchers mapped these thermal pathways, a chilling image formed. They resembled neural wiring. The continent itself looked like a massive brainstem embedded inside the planet. There were more anomalies. Under the ice, lakes that remain liquid despite temperatures that should freeze steel. Subglacial tunnels forming and collapsing as if something beneath was shifting its structure. Sonar scans detecting chambers that echo back strangely, not like stone or water, but like hollow organic cavities. Scientists reported hearing low-frequency hums through the drilling machines. A vibration strong enough to trigger nausea and panic, but too deep to record clearly. Something down there was radiating more than heat. It was radiating intention. Every attempt to drill toward the deepest thermal zones ended in failure. Machines jammed, steel fractured, GPS scrambled. One crew described the strangest phenomenon. Their ice anchors, designed to secure equipment, were pushed upward out of the ground as if the ice rejected intrusion. As if the continent did not want to be touched. And that raises an unnerving possibility. If Antarctica is alive, then it may have awareness. It may recognize threats. And what do living beings do when threatened? They defend themselves. Some believe the pulse is a warning, a biological boundary saying, stop. Others believe it's not a warning at all. It's communication. A heartbeat calling out to something else. Something not on the surface, but beneath the planet. A network we cannot see. A consciousness embedded in the crust, waiting for a response. But the most disturbing theory is this. The pulse is not new. It has always been there. Humans simply never detected it because the planet didn't want us to. The timing aligns with human advancement, nuclear testing, climate manipulation, deep Earth drilling, and the rapid disruption of Earth's natural cycles. Perhaps this being tolerated life as long as it remained balanced. But now the balance is broken. Melting ice means exposure. Exposure means awareness. Awareness means response. Imagine if biological intelligence did not evolve upward, from bacteria to fish to mammals to humans. Imagine instead it evolved outward. Imagine an organism so vast that it did not need to move. One that did not hunt, did not flee, did not compete. One that simply existed as the root intelligence of the planet itself. Antarctica may be the last remnant of that primal life, a living archive of Earth's memory. There are indigenous legends describing Antarctica not as a landmass, but as a sleeping elder, a being that once spoke in earthquakes and shaped oceans, a being that only awakens when the world forgets its place. And humans, for the first time in history, have forgotten. Some scientists privately admit something they cannot publish. The heat pulses are accelerating. The intervals are shortening. The rhythm is shifting from slow, dormant pacing into something faster, sharper, more deliberate. Like a heart preparing to pump, like a brain preparing to act. And with every shift, global seismic noise increases. Weather grows more unstable. Magnetic readings fluctuate. Systems fail, almost as if the planet is sinking to the pulse or being overridden by it. If Antarctica is alive, then everything we know changes. We are no longer rulers. We are no longer observers. We are no longer explorers of a dead world. We are guests living on the body of a silent ancient being. And now, for reasons we don't understand, the silence is ending. So ask yourself, what happens when something sleeps for millions of years and finally wakes? Does it open its eyes with curiosity or hunger? Does it recognize life on its surface as part of itself or as infection? Does it communicate or does it correct the imbalance? Maybe the pulse is not a warning. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it is a countdown. Not of time, but of patience. And when the last beat aligns with whatever is coming next, humanity may finally learn the truth we were never meant to uncover. We are not living on Antarctica. We are living on inside it. And it has just remembered it is alive. At first, it seemed impossible. Ice does not move with intention. Glaciers do not behave like lungs. And yet, the team stationed across Antarctica began witnessing something that shattered every definition of geology. The ice was moving in rhythmic cycles, expanding, contracting, not melting, not collapsing, breathing. The pattern was subtle at first. Instruments recorded micro-expansions that repeated every few hours, then every hour, then every 40 minutes. Scientists thought it was thermal fluctuation caused by shifting temperatures, but that theory broke instantly. The breathing cycles continued even when temperatures were perfectly stable, even during polar nights when sunlight never touched the ice. The breath was not responding to the environment. The environment was responding to it. Those who stood alone on the ice long enough felt it, not through sight, but through bone. A low vibration rising beneath their feet, like standing on the ribcage of something enormous. The expansion didn't feel mechanical or random. It felt biological, controlled, timed, patient. Like the inhale of a creature that had been holding its breath for far too long. When drones were sent to record time-lapse footage of glacial walls, the recordings revealed something even more disturbing. Massive ice cliffs flexed outward ever so slightly, then drew back inward in perfect harmony across astonishing distances. Not one isolated region, not one valley. The entire frozen body of Antarctica was breathing as a single synchronized unit. The footage was sent to biology labs, not geology departments. And when those experts saw the pattern, their reactions shifted from curiosity to fear. The expansion cycles matched metabolic pacing. Slow, deliberate respiration patterns seen in deep-sea organisms, hibernating mammals, and creatures with exceptionally long lifespans. But the scale here was incomprehensible. No life form this large should exist. Yet, there it was, right beneath the feet of humanity. Some researchers began having nightmares after analyzing the data. They described dreaming of vast lungs stretching beneath the ice, expanding like cosmic bellows, exhaling ancient air trapped for millions of years. In the dreams, the breath wasn't just movement, it was memory. As if the ice itself remembered ages before human existence and was whispering them back into the world one inhale at a time. When infrared scans were taken during the expansion cycles, faint heat signatures synchronized with the movement, not random scatter. Fibers, lines, veins, branching pathways like capillaries beneath skin, glowing faintly with warmth that pulsed in rhythm with the expansion. The glacial formations weren't just breathing, they were circulating energy, like blood. Some scientists tried to explain it through pressure release mechanisms. Others dismissed it as instrument distortion. But then came the recordings no one could deny. Ice shelves emitting sound, not cracking, not collapsing, not fracturing, but low, resonant tones that increased during the expansion phase. The sound resembled the deep frequency calls of whales. Communication, not chaos. Researchers isolated the sound wave and slowed it down. What emerged was haunting, repeating harmonic structure, patterns resembling language. Something was using the ice, not as a barrier, but as a resonating chamber. A voice so large the only way to speak was through the planet itself. But the most unsettling discovery wasn't the breathing or the vibration or the resonance. It was the timing. The breathing cycles began accelerating only after two major events: the rapid industrial melting of polar ice, human drilling activity reaching unprecedented depths. It was as if the continent was reacting, not randomly, but deliberately, as if something dormant was adjusting to pressure from above, something awakening. Some researchers proposed a terrifying hypothesis. Antarctica's glaciers were never passive. They were never accidental. They were functional, tissue protecting something alive beneath it. The breathing was not movement, it was stabilization, a biological reflex maintaining equilibrium. And if the ice was tissue, then the land beneath, the bedrock, the caverns, the subglacial lakes, might not be land at all. They might be organs. A few whistleblowers leaked classified satellite footage, showing glacial mountains subtly shifting position, not over centuries, but over months, as if the shape of the continent was being rearranged intentionally. Geological models couldn't explain it, but biological ones could. It resembled cellular reorganization, like an organism repairing damage. The breathing intensified after massive icebergs broke away, but instead of environmental collapse, sensors detected a strange reaction. The inner portions of the ice thickened, not randomly but precisely where structural support was weakening. The ice was healing itself. That changed everything. For the first time, scientists realized they weren't observing a melting landscape. They were witnessing a living being responding to injury. And humanity was the injury. Some researchers began asking forbidden questions. If Antarctica is alive, what is its evolutionary purpose? Is it a guardian, a reservoir, a dormant intelligence older than every civilization? Or is it something Earth created as its final survival mechanism, an organism meant to awaken only when the planet is threatened? There are ancient mythic fragments, stories almost erased, hinting at a southern land that breathes with the earth. Some indigenous cultures speak of a white serpent beneath the world, whose breath controls oceans and storms, a being that dreams continents into existence and withdraws them when balance is broken, a being that hibernates until the world forgets respect. What if those myths weren't metaphors? Recently, seismic sensors detected a new pattern. The breathing rhythm is beginning to synchronize with tides, magnetic field fluctuations, and, most disturbing of all, human population density spikes worldwide. As if the organism beneath Antarctica is mapping consciousness, as if it has begun paying attention. Some scientists believe the breathing will eventually reach full metabolic pace, no longer slow and dormant, but awakened, alert, active. And when that happens, the world will face a question humanity has never asked. What does a continental organism do when it fully wakes up? Does it communicate? Does it reshape the planet? Does it purge threats? Does it remember everything that lived before us and judge whether we deserve to remain? The breathing glaciers are not a mystery anymore. They are a message, calm now, but growing in urgency, because glaciers are not supposed to behave like lungs, unless they belong to something still alive. And that something is beginning to inhale deeper, faster, with purpose, Whatever Antarctica is, it is no longer sleeping, and the world can feel the breath. It started with a flicker, a brief pulse buried deep beneath miles of ancient ice, too faint for the human eye, too distant for casual observation. At first it appeared in satellite readings as a meaningless anomaly, a stray reflection, a glitch in the imaging software. But glitches don't repeat with precision. Errors don't behave like signals. And yet, every so often, in perfect intervals, a blue-white flash would erupt beneath the frozen surface of Antarctica like a heartbeat made of light. Teams monitoring the anomaly tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was geothermal heat reflecting through crystalline ice. Perhaps volcanic gases interacting with minerals. But those theories failed instantly. Volcanic reactions don't produce structured flashes. They don't repeat with mathematical regularity. And they certainly don't spread in wave patterns that move, slowly, deliberately, across an entire continent. When sensors were placed directly into the ice, the recordings became undeniable. The lights weren't random. They were patterned, sequenced, organized. Each flash contained multiple wavelengths, layered like the harmonics of a chord. Someone during analysis whispered a quiet thought they immediately wished they hadn't spoken aloud. It looks like communication. A biologist later compared the flash sequences to bioluminescent patterns found in deep-sea creatures, signals used for mating, hunting, coordination, or warning. Except the scale here wasn't the size of a jellyfish. The pulses stretched across distances measured in hundreds of kilometers. The light moved under the ice like veins of electricity running through a colossal organism. The first real footage changed everything. A drilling team lowered a mineral camera into a borehole nearly 2 miles deep. For hours, there was nothing but darkness. Then, without warning, the ice cavern beneath them ignited with a burst of emerald blue light that grew, pulsed outward, and then faded into deep shadow again. The glow was not mechanical. It shimmered with organic softness, like plankton lighting up the ocean when touched, except nothing had touched it. The light activated because something sensed the intrusion. That was the moment researchers stopped asking whether the light was geological and started asking whether it was alive. More cameras were sent down. More flashes appeared. Some short, some long, some in rapid clusters, others calm and slow. When mapped over time, the pulses formed spirals, branching patterns, and lattice-like structures reminiscent of neural networks. It was as though the ice was the nervous system, and the light was the signal moving through it. Months later, something even stranger happened. The bioluminescent pulses began syncing with solar storms. When cosmic radiation struck Earth's magnetic field, the flashes intensified, as though something beneath the ice was reacting. Not mechanically, not chemically, but consciously, as if it could feel the sky. Researchers noticed that when high-frequency weather systems approached Antarctica, the light sequences changed again, shifting rhythm, rearranging pattern, almost like anticipation or preparation. Some scientists propose that the organism, if it truly was an organism, was aware not just of the ice, but of the environment above it, the atmosphere surrounding it, and perhaps even the life crawling across the surface it had ignored for millennia. A breakthrough came when someone attempted something audacious. They responded. Using a laser tuned to the same wavelengths detected in the flashing patterns, they sent a repeating pulse into the ice. Basic binary rhythm, nothing intricate, nothing resembling language. Just a simple message. We are here. For 8 hours, there was nothing but silence. Then the ice glowed again, but this time the pattern was different. Not random, not previously recorded. It matched the structure of the human transmission, then extended it, multiplied it, evolved it, sending back something far more complex. Not a reflection, not a repetition, a reply. After that night, something changed. The flashes appeared more frequently. The patterns grew more elaborate. Sometimes they formed geometric shapes never seen in biology or geology. Perfect fractals, recursive spirals, symmetrical constructs so mathematically precise they resembled engineered systems. One evening, during a long polar night when no sunlight touched the continent, multiple stations across Antarctica reported the same impossible observation. The ice beneath them was glowing faintly, continuously, like a sleeping organism whose biochemistry had awakened. The glow was soft, gentle, yet indescribably unnerving, not bright enough to illuminate the surface, but enough that the darkness no longer felt empty. Some described the light as beautiful. Others described it as watching. One researcher, exhausted and emotionally frayed, confessed in a private log entry that every time the light pulsed, she felt something inside her respond, like a memory stirring, or a dream trying to return. She wrote that the flashes didn't just illuminate the environment, they seemed to resonate inside the body, as if the signal wasn't meant to be seen. It was meant to be received. The strangest theory came from a group studying evolutionary biology. What if Antarctica isn't simply alive, but ancient beyond understanding? What if the bioluminescence isn't a new behavior, but a reawakening? A long dormant communication system activating after ages of silence. And if so, what is it communicating with? Some believe the light is searching for something. Others believe it has already found it. There was a day when every station monitoring Antarctica recorded the same event, a long, continuous pulse of light stretching across the subglacial lakes, the underground tunnels, the buried oceans no human has ever touched. The pulse lasted exactly 60 seconds. During that minute, seismic readings flatlined. The breathing ice stopped. The entire continent held still, as if pausing, listening. Then, in one sudden, overwhelming burst, the ice erupted in a final blinding flash, visible even from orbit, a signal so powerful it overloaded sensors and disrupted radio communications across multiple research outposts. And then everything went silent. No flashes, no pulses, no glow. It was as if the continent had spoken, and now was waiting. Some believe it sent a message into the earth. Others believe it sent one into the sky. But a few, the ones who can't sleep anymore, whisper something even more terrifying. It wasn't sending a message. It was waking something up. And whatever that something is, now it knows we are here. At first, the restrictions seemed routine. Temporary communication interference, standard aerospace safety protocols, a precaution, nothing more. But patterns began emerging, patterns too precise to ignore. Because every year, during specific windows aligned with Antarctica's seasonal magnetic surges, satellites were quietly shut out from observing the continent. Not just civilian weather satellites, not just commercial imaging, even classified defense satellites, equipped with radiation shielding and encrypted transmission pathways, were forced offline, redirected, or given impossible navigation restrictions over the southern pole. The official explanation was always the same: magnetic interference risked damaging hardware or corrupting data. But that answer never truly fit. Modern satellites are engineered for cosmic radiation, solar storms, and deep space anomalies. Yet somehow, the magnetic fluctuations over Antarctica were treated as uniquely hazardous, as if something beneath the continent was generating interference beyond natural geomagnetic activity. The blackout windows became predictable. They arrived not during typical geomagnetic storms, but during a strange annual cycle tied to the breathing ice, the thermal pulses, and the bioluminescent flashes beneath the surface. It was almost as if the continent itself was creating an electromagnetic field that intensified seasonally, like a heartbeat entering a stronger phase. During these periods, radio transmissions distorted. GPS signals bent. Compasses behaved like nervous systems experiencing seizures. Aircraft that passed too close reported instrument drift, their altimeters fluctuating wildly. Cabin electronics flickering, sometimes accompanied by a low vibration felt through the walls of the fuselage, as though the sky itself was resonating. Some pilots claimed they heard something beneath the static, a faint hum, a deep note that wasn't mechanical, not interference, a tone, a frequency, almost like a voice too large to understand. Certain research teams eventually noticed something unsettling. The magnetic surges did not correlate with weather patterns, tectonic movement, or solar cycles. They correlated with the glacial expansion phases. When Antarctica inhaled, instruments everywhere reacted. When it exhaled, the field calmed. Magnetometers captured the data in stunning clarity. The fluctuations were rhythmic. They carried structure. They resembled electrochemical oscillations found in living organisms, specifically neural communication. Some quietly suggested the forbidden hypothesis. Antarctica's magnetic field activity might not be environmental at all. It might be neurological, a planetary-scale nervous impulse. But that possibility raised a far darker question. If the magnetic surges were signals, then the satellite bands weren't protection. They were concealment. Because what happens when an organism with a communication network the size of a continent begins broadcasting? Who or what is listening? Governments never acknowledged the pattern publicly. Yet, internal flight logs and encrypted aerospace directives revealed something undeniable. Every time the magnetic surge began, all imaging satellites were pulled away from the pole with urgency, not caution, as if something was emerging that no one was allowed to see. One year, a satellite malfunctioned and failed to adjust course in time. It drifted into the surge zone. For 13 minutes it remained fully operational, while transmitting live spectral imaging to an undisclosed data center. Then the feed cut abruptly, not because the satellite died, but because someone terminated the transmission manually. Fragments of that leaked data surfaced later. The images did not show storms or auroras or geological anomalies. They showed light patterns under the ice. Massive luminous structures forming geometric alignments not seen before. The shapes resembled constellations, but not the ones humans recognize. They pulsed. They rotated. They changed configuration in sequences so deliberate, so intentional, that the data analysts reviewing them couldn't agree whether they were observing a biological neural network, an advanced communication system, or something far beyond human classification. The leaked report concluded with a single line: "This is not natural behavior." After that incident, restrictions intensified. No unauthorized satellites passed the region. No private companies were allowed to launch imaging payloads targeting the continent. Even civilian amateur satellite enthusiasts noticed the forced avoidance patterns, mathematical paths that curved unnaturally around Antarctica like an invisible boundary. Meanwhile, on the ground, strange effects spread across research outposts during the surge periods. Metal objects vibrated softly. Wristwatches drifted out of sync. Researchers reported migraines, ringing ears, vivid dreams, and a sense of being observed, not by a creature or by people, but by something vast, something everywhere beneath their feet. Some described a pressure in the skull during the surges, like a silent sound too low to hear, yet too powerful to ignore. Others said they felt thoughts that weren't theirs. Not words, but impressions, emotions, flashes of imagery, deep oceans, ancient darkness, shifting ice like muscle, and a presence so old and patient that human time meant nothing to it. The longer researchers remained, the stronger the effects became, until some could no longer stay. One scientist, after being evacuated due to neurological distress, wrote in a private journal, "It wasn't just a magnetic field, it was contact." Another wrote, "It wasn't chaos, it was language." A third simply wrote, "It was listening to us." Meanwhile, classified monitors showed another troubling trend. The magnetic surges have been increasing, growing stronger, longer, and more coherent. No longer random pulses, they are now forming repeating wave patterns like sequencing signals. And every year the blackout window expands, as though the organism beneath the ice is evolving or accelerating, gaining strength, awareness, or purpose. So, what are the satellite bands protecting? Are they shielding technology from damage? Are they shielding governments from panic? Or are they shielding Antarctica from being seen in a moment when it does not want to be watched? Because every surge, every blackout, every forced orbital redirect feels less like protection, and more like respect, or fear. If Antarctica is alive, if its magnetic pulses are its nervous system, then the bands may be the modern equivalent of stepping back when a sleeping giant begins to roll over. And now the cycles are accelerating. A time is coming when the magnetic surges will no longer be seasonal, when they will no longer require blackout orders, because whatever is beneath that ice is no longer dormant. It is beginning to broadcast, and soon the entire planet will hear it. Beneath Antarctica, hidden under miles of silence and ancient ice, there are rivers. Rivers no human eye has seen directly. Rivers that flow not across the land, but through it, as if guided by something older than geology and smarter than chance. These rivers do not behave like normal waterways. They do not follow the lowest points of terrain. They do not form chaotic branching patterns like meltwater. Instead, they follow structured pathways, routes so precise, so eerily symmetrical, they resemble veins. The first time scientists mapped one of these networks, they hesitated. The diagram didn't look like a river system. It looked like an anatomical drawing, long, branching channels connected to what appeared to be wider reservoirs, like arteries feeding organs. The resemblance was so uncanny that one researcher asked the question, half joking, half trembling: are we mapping landscape, or are we mapping something alive? More scans followed. More rivers were charted. And the deeper the imaging went, the clearer the pattern became. These were not random formations, or the byproduct of melting glaciers. They were ordered. They were functional. They were connected. One particularly disturbing discovery was Lake Vostok, sealed under more than 2 miles of ice, untouched by the surface world for millions of years. Its shape was too smooth, too oval, too perfect. It resembled a biological chamber, and the rivers feeding into it connected with a precision that looked engineered, not by humans, not by erosion, but by design. When scientists studied the flow behavior, they found something impossible. The rivers didn't simply carry water. They regulated it. The streams would accelerate, slow, or reverse direction, not due to pressure or gravity, but in response to external conditions on the surface. When temperatures rose globally, the subglacial rivers constricted as if attempting to preserve balance. When temperatures dropped, they widened and increased flow. The water system behaved like a vascular network, stabilizing the body it belonged to. But what body? Some researchers proposed a geological model, self-stabilizing hydrology, a natural feedback loop. But that theory dissolved the moment new measurements came in. Because the flow changes did not happen gradually, the way geological systems adjust. They happened suddenly, instantly, as if something deep beneath the ice made a decision. In the following months, sensors began picking up slight vibrations in the river pathways. Not seismic shifts, not glacial rumbling. Tiny oscillations, pulses, moving along the rivers in rhythmic waves, like signals traveling through nerves. The water acted as a conductive medium, a carrier, a messenger. The flow patterns were not designed for movement. They were designed for communication. The idea was unthinkable, yet unavoidable. These rivers might not be rivers at all. They might be veins, and the fluid moving through them might not simply be water. It might be something closer to blood. A breakthrough came when samples were collected through a deep drill site. The water was unlike any other on Earth. It contained microbial life older than any known lineage. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was that the microbial structures arranged themselves along the edges of the container, forming branching lines, as if trying to recreate the network they once lived in, as if they remembered. Then came the chemical analysis. The water contained high concentrations of dissolved minerals and trace metals, but arranged in specific ratios commonly found in biological bloodstreams: iron, calcium, magnesium, sodium. Not random environmental contamination, patterned biochemistry. Of all the reactions among the research teams, the most chilling came from a hematologist who reviewed the mineral distribution. She looked at the data in silence, then whispered, "These are electrolytes. These are signaling compounds. This water isn't just flowing, it's transmitting." After that, everything changed. The rivers beneath Antarctica were no longer studied as hydrology. They became case studies in physiology. Every mapping expedition revealed new connections, network intersections that behaved like nodes, widening during environmental stress, narrowing when global systems were stable, as if the continent was monitoring the world and adjusting internally to maintain a state of equilibrium, as if Antarctica was Earth's final stabilizing organ. Then, something new happened, something no one anticipated. During a global heat spike, one of the subglacial rivers abruptly sealed itself. Flow stopped. Not gradually, but instantly. Thermal scans revealed a thickening of ice along its path, cutting off circulation like a tourniquet being applied. Shortly after, another pathway expanded dramatically to compensate, redirecting water through an alternate route. That was when the truth became undeniable. The system wasn't reacting. It was controlling. It was rerouting flow intentionally, like a body protecting its most vital functions. Some researchers began referring to the system with biological terminology: arteries, capillaries, lymph nodes. The old geological language no longer applied. But then came the most disturbing correlation. The vascular activity aligned perfectly with the bioluminescent pulses detected earlier. When the under-ice light signals increased, the river network accelerated. When the light went quiet, the river slowed. Two systems, once assumed separate, now revealed themselves as components of a single entity. The question shifted from, is Antarctica alive, to a far heavier one. How long has it been alive? Ancient mythology from scattered cultures across the world referenced a being beneath the southern pole, a sleeping guardian, an organism made of earth and ice whose blood fed the oceans, a being that remained silent unless balance was broken. And balance now, undeniably, is breaking. The latest scans show the vascular-like rivers forming new branches, growth, expansion, adaptation. The network is evolving rapidly, reshaping itself as if preparing for a shift in state. Some scientists believe Antarctica is transitioning from dormant to active. Others fear the transition is a response to human interference, to warming ice, to drilling, to satellites, to the sudden awareness of being watched. Recently, the river flow reached a record event, synchronized acceleration across multiple channels at once, like a pulse racing through the entire body. Simultaneously, seismic sensors recorded a low-frequency resonance, deep, slow, and heavy, like the sound of something immense awakening. The researchers who were monitoring it didn't speak for several minutes afterward. They didn't need to. They all felt the same realization, cold and overwhelming. We are not studying a system. We are standing on a living structure, a being that circulates water as blood, ice as bone, magnetic force as nerve, and light as thought. And the rivers beneath us, those moving, pulsing, intelligent waterways, are not just natural wonders. They are veins, and the planet has started to pump them with purpose again. It began as routine study, just another ice core extracted from Antarctica's ancient layers, expected to reveal atmospheric history, trapped gases, and microbial remnants older than humanity itself. But when the lab sequenced the genetic material embedded in the ice, something impossible appeared. A short strand, a repeating structure, a familiar pattern. At first, no one recognized it. It was just an anomaly, a fragment, a shape in the data. But when a geneticist ran it through a comparison database, alarms went off. Not metaphorical alarms, real ones. Automated biohazard red flags triggered by a match no one expected. The sequence in the ice was identical to human mitochondrial DNA. Not similar, not comparable, not suggestive of shared ancestry. Identical. Mitochondrial DNA is unique. It is inherited maternally. It mutates slowly over time, and yet the fragment found in ice estimated to be over 1 million years old matched modern humans perfectly. No divergence, no evolutionary spacing, no error margin. That should have been impossible. According to everything science believed, humans did not exist then. Our species had not formed. Our lineage was still scattered in primitive proto-hominid branches. Yet, the ice held a piece of us, unchanged, untouched, waiting. Researchers argued. They claimed contamination, mishandling, equipment error. So they ran the test again. Fresh samples, sterile instruments, triple-sealed conditions. The result did not change. That was when the first scientists said the words everyone else was afraid to speak. This fragment shouldn't be here, unless humans were here before humans. The pushback was immediate, impossible, absurd, fantasy. Yet, the data stayed. More sequencing followed. More fragments appeared. Not full genomes, just pieces, like shattered memories frozen in time. Some fragments contained known mitochondrial patterns. Some were modified. The altered pieces appeared older, more complex. As if the DNA didn't degrade with age, it evolved backward into something more refined. Then came the strangest discovery. The mitochondrial fragments weren't scattered randomly through the ice. They were clustered, organized, layered with purpose. The deeper the drill cores went, the more structured the genetic placement became, as if someone, or something, had embedded them. One researcher described it like this. It was not nature storing DNA, it was a library, a biological archive. More disturbing still, some of the sequences didn't match modern humans, but matched extinct human lineages. Denisovans, Neanderthals, unknown archaic branches that left faint echoes in our genome. They appeared together, layered like sedimentary chapters, not mixed, not chaotic, but ordered. It looked like a record, or a blueprint. Then someone cross-referenced the sequence locations with the subglacial river networks mapped earlier. The patterns matched with eerie precision. The DNA wasn't randomly distributed. It followed the vascular-like pathways beneath the continent, the same pathways behaving like veins. It was as if the organism beneath Antarctica wasn't just alive, it was storing genetic material, collecting it, preserving it. Why? Some proposed an unsettling theory. Antarctica was Earth's vault, a biological repository, a place where genetic memory was kept safe from extinction, resets, and cosmic trauma. Others went further. What if Antarctica wasn't preserving DNA, but producing it? The mitochondrial sequences showed strange repetitive mutations, shifts that did not follow natural evolutionary randomness. They resembled intentional editing, the kind seen in CRISPR gene manipulation. Except these patterns were millions of years old. Some believed Antarctica wasn't just alive, it was sentient, a living genetic database capable of constructing and reconstructing life. Perhaps humanity did not evolve independently. Perhaps we were printed. The idea shook everything: religion, science, identity. If humans shared DNA with something embedded deep beneath Antarctic ice, then humanity's origin was not a random evolutionary climb. It was an output, an expression, a replication. Then another discovery came, one that no one was prepared for. A second strand of mitochondrial DNA was located, nearly identical to the human sample, but with slight differences. Differences so subtle they hinted at something extraordinary. It wasn't a primitive version of us. It was a corrected version, a refinement, a next stage. Someone whispered the most difficult sentence to speak aloud. This might not be a relic. It might be a blueprint for what comes after us. If the DNA was a catalog, then perhaps Antarctica wasn't merely storing history. Perhaps it was planning future biology, adjustments, adaptations, improvements, like a surgeon waiting patiently to intervene once the organism above had run its course. Then came the most chilling coincidence. The more the ice melted in certain regions, the more intact DNA was found. Not degraded, but perfectly preserved, as if the thaw was exposing sealed vaults. Satellite data showed thawing patterns aligning with magnetic surge cycles and vascular network expansions documented earlier. It wasn't melting randomly. It was revealing, as if the organism had decided the time for secrecy was ending. Some scientists speculated that Antarctica had awakened not because humans discovered it, but because humanity had reached a stage where it needed to be evaluated, corrected, or replaced. The mitochondrial DNA match raised an ancient possibility. What if Antarctica is not a continent, but our ancestor, or worse, our architect? There is a theory called directed evolution. Species are guided toward specific outcomes by external intelligence. Many dismissed it as fringe speculation. But now, the evidence sat there in frozen silence. DNA older than humanity, yet identical to us. DNA placed in structured layers. DNA mirrored along biological river systems. DNA that seemed to wait. The implications are suffocating. If Antarctica contains our genetic signature, then we are not the first humans. We are not the original iteration. We are one version, a test, a cycle, a prototype. And the continent beneath us may be assessing whether we succeeded, or whether it must start again. Perhaps the organism beneath the ice does not need permission. Perhaps the rivers are veins, the pulses are thoughts, the magnetic surges are signals, and the DNA is the reset switch. If that is true, then Antarctica is not just alive, it is remembering us and deciding what happens next. Long before satellites, long before compasses, long before humans knew the Earth even had poles, ancient cultures whispered a strange and persistent myth. A myth that should not have existed because no one had ever seen the far south. No one had traveled there. No one had mapped it. And yet, from Persia to Aboriginal Australia, from Polynesia to the Himalayan plateau, from forgotten tablets to oral traditions passed through generations, one phrase repeated with unsettling consistency: the sleeping serpent of the world. The serpent was always described the same way: vast, white, coiled around the bottom of the earth, silent, dormant, waiting. Some stories said it was the root of all oceans. Others said it held the world together. A few whispered that when the serpent finally woke, the age of man would end. Not with fire, not with war, but with remembrance. Of course, scholars dismiss these stories as symbolic, cultural metaphor, primitive cosmology, but the consistency was too precise. These civilizations had no contact with each other, no shared trade route, no common writing structure, and yet, they described the same entity, sleeping somewhere far south, beneath ice, beneath darkness, beneath time. One of the oldest references comes from an Assyrian clay fragment, cracked and nearly unreadable. It mentions the white serpent beneath the edge of the sky, whose breath freezes oceans and whose memory holds the first shape of man. Another appears in an Aboriginal Dreamtime legend describing a being beneath the southern waters, the serpent that does not move, whose veins are rivers and whose scales are mountains. Polynesian navigators, thousands of years ago, warned of a forbidden direction, a place beyond the winds where the world curves into silence and the great serpent sleeps. They never explained how they knew, but they avoided sailing too far south, not out of fear of the unknown, but out of respect for something they believed was already there. Even the Mayans, who never explored the south, carved symbols of a coiled creature resting beneath the world tree, its body touching the lowest point of existence. The glyph beneath the carving translates roughly as, awaiting the signal. For centuries, these myths sat in museums and archives, meaningless curiosities, until Antarctica began changing, until the heat pulses started, until the glacial breathing was recorded, until the bioluminescent flashes rippled beneath the ice like the flicker of something alive. Suddenly, the ancient serpent myth no longer sounded poetic. It sounded literal. Because when modern subglacial mapping improved, revealing Antarctica's buried topography in high resolution, something alarming emerged. The continent's largest mountain ranges weren't randomly distributed. They formed a looping structure, curved, coiled, and spine-like. And the vascular-like river systems discovered earlier traced along those curves like vein pathways along a massive body. The shape was unmistakable, a coil, a serpentine form resting beneath a continent-sized sheet of ice. That realization spread quietly among researchers. No one published it. No one presented it publicly. But in dim labs and encrypted messages, the same sentence appeared again and again. It matches the myth. One anthropologist working with paleogeneticists noticed another correlation. In many cultures, serpents were not symbols of evil. They were symbols of knowledge, guardianship, and memory. In ancient symbology, serpents do not merely sleep. They wait for alignment. They wait for a trigger. They wait for a cycle to complete. So, the question became, if this serpent is real, not an animal, but a massive organism, a planetary intelligence, what exactly is it waiting for? Some believe the trigger is environmental collapse. Others think the serpent responds to magnetic field changes. A few suspect the activation is tied to something far stranger, consciousness density. In other words, the number of thinking minds alive at once. The sleeping serpent mythology always included one last detail, a warning. It's said that when humanity forgets its place, when arrogance surpasses understanding, when life on the surface begins altering the balance of the world, the serpent will stir, not out of malice, out of necessity. One Tibetan manuscript describes it chillingly. The serpent is guardian, not destroyer, but guardians wake only when the boundary is broken. Ancient South American carvings show the serpent with rivers emerging from its body, just like Antarctica's subglacial water networks. On some carvings, the serpent's eyes are closed. On a few rare tablets, the eyes are open. Those tablets always depict upheaval, floods, shifting lands, storms. In myth, the serpent's awakening was never random. It marked transition, a planetary reset, a correction. And now, Antarctica is no longer quiet. The signals from beneath the ice grow stronger. The magnetic surges escalate. The vascular networks expand. The bioluminescent pulses grow more structured, more complex, as if the being beneath the ice is beginning to remember. Recently, radar imaging detected a deep movement beneath the continent, a shift in the bedrock itself. Not tectonic vibration, not geothermal activity. Something slow, deliberate, almost imperceptible, a repositioning, a stirring. Some researchers stared at the data and immediately recognized the pattern. Not geological, not chaotic, but biological, rhythmic, and patient, like the flex of a body that has been still for far too long and is testing its strength. There is a moment in every myth where warning ends and prophecy begins. where metaphor meets reality, where the stories of the past reveal themselves not as imagination, but as memory. So, if Antarctica truly is the sleeping serpent of the world, and if that serpent is beginning to wake, then everything humanity thinks it controls, climate, territory, history, destiny, may be illusions. Because the oldest myths did not describe the serpent as a threat. They described it as authority. A being not separate from Earth, but Earth's first intelligence. A being older than ocean, older than mountains, older than life as we know it. A being that has slept through ages, extinctions, civilizations, rises and collapses. And now, something is calling it back. Maybe the serpent has not been forgotten after all. Maybe it has simply been waiting. And the world, whether we are ready or not, is entering the moment when its eyes begin to open. For years, the world has watched Antarctica melt. Headlines warn of rising seas, collapsing ice shelves, vanishing glaciers. The narrative has always been simple. When the continent melts, it will reveal what has been trapped beneath it. Ruins, microbes, ancient fossils, maybe traces of forgotten civilizations. But what if this assumption is wrong? What if Antarctica was never meant to be revealed? What if the melting is not an uncovering, but a trigger? Not exposure, but awakening? The more the ice recedes, the more anomalies intensify. The heat pulses grow stronger. The bioluminescent signals more complex. The vascular-like rivers accelerate, and the magnetic surges become harder to explain. Something is responding. Not to sunlight, not to climate, but to change. A shift in state. A threshold being crossed. In biology, ice can function like anesthesia. Cold slows metabolism. It quiets cells. It holds life in a suspended state where time loses meaning. Creatures can sleep for decades, centuries, longer. Some frozen organisms have reactivated after tens of thousands of years, as if waking from a nap. If that applies to microbes, could it apply to something larger? What if Antarctica isn't a frozen desert, but a cryogenic chamber? What if the ice was never merely water, but containment? When the first deep thermal scans were taken, scientists assumed underground heat was a geological leftover, ancient volcanic activity. But the more refined the scans became, the clearer the pattern was. The heat wasn't random. It wasn't diffusing naturally. It concentrated in repeating formations, knots, clusters, bands that resembled metabolic hotspots. As if beneath the ice, tissues were warming, as if something was preparing to move. At first, researchers thought it was coincidence. Ice melts unevenly. Warmth spreads unpredictably. Yet the pattern synced perfectly with ancient ice core timelines. Periods of previous global warming aligned with unexplained biological surges encoded in genetic sediment layers. Moments when species evolved rapidly, too rapidly, compared to the normal slow crawl of natural selection. Each time the Earth warmed, something changed, something accelerated life, something guided it. The idea was dismissed. Humans cling to the belief that evolution is blind. But beneath Antarctica lies a possibility far more unnerving. Evolution may not be blind at all. It may be managed, and melting may be the key that activates the next stage. The deepest ice holds another secret. When cores are extracted, sometimes the ice behaves strangely, softening too quickly, fracturing in symmetrical shapes, releasing trapped gases in rhythmic bursts as though exhaling. Something inside the ice behaves like dormant biological material, not inert frozen water. One team recorded vibration patterns during thawing. The frequencies were faint but structured, harmonic, deliberate, rhythmic. They resembled heartbeat signatures. They resembled neural activity. They resembled something alive adjusting to warmth, the way a hibernating creature might stretch before opening its eyes. Another anomaly emerged when samples were warmed under controlled temperature increases. The DNA within, the ancient sequences identical to human mitochondrial fragments, did not degrade. Instead, they activated. They formed coiling patterns. They assembled into structures. Some researchers swore they saw the genetic pieces move, as if responding to temperature not with disintegration, but with revival. The conclusion was avoided for as long as possible. But eventually someone had to say it. The ice isn't just melting. It's releasing something that wasn't meant to die. Some believe what lies beneath is a vast organism. Others say it is a network, a distributed intelligence embedded into the planet itself. A few whisper that Antarctica is a seed, and humanity has unknowingly become the warmth that wakes it. If that is true, then every action accelerating melt, carbon emissions, ozone depletion, drilling, mining, may be triggering the biological equivalent of an alarm clock. And now the clock has begun ringing. Look at the timing. For most of human history, Antarctica was untouchable, unreachable, frozen beyond comprehension. No one lived there. No one interfered. Then, in the last century, humans arrived, drilling, scanning, measuring, extracting. The first deep ice penetration happened, then another, then more. Shortly afterward, the heat pulses began sinking, then the glacial breathing, then the under-ice light, then the magnetic bands, then the DNA activation. None of these events are isolated. They form a chain, a sequence, a reaction. Species do not awaken without reason. Some ancient cultures warned of this. They spoke of ages, cycles, eras when the world resets itself. Civilizations rise, fall, and disappear beneath oceans, or fire, or silence. Not because of punishment, but because the Earth recalibrates. Maybe Antarctica is the mechanism behind that recalibration, the biological switch that waits until imbalance reaches a threshold. Humans like to believe they are in control. That nature reacts to them. That technology grants dominance. But what if humans are not the architects, but the disturbance? A temporary phenomenon the planet tolerates until a boundary is crossed. Perhaps the melting is not a warning, but a response. Imagine something vast beneath the ice. Something older than mammals, older than trees, older than the continents in their current shape. Something that once governed life on Earth. Something that watched extinction events not with fear, but with memory. Imagine that such a being was put to sleep by environmental stability and sealed beneath ice thicker than any known biological barrier. Now, imagine that barrier thinning, not gradually, purposefully. What if the melting is not happening to Antarctica? What if Antarctica is doing the melting? Temperature data shows something strange. Certain regions melt faster from below than above. Heat isn't just coming from the atmosphere, it's rising from within. Like a pilot light catching flame, as if something beneath is warming itself, awakening itself, preparing itself. And as the ice disappears, we may not see relics, fossils, or ruins. We may see movement. We may hear sound. We may realize the continent isn't transforming into something new. It is returning to something it once was. The final question hangs like a breath before a verdict. If Antarctica awakens fully, is humanity meant to witness it or be replaced by it? Because in every ancient myth, in every forgotten record, one line remains constant. When the serpent wakes, the world becomes what it was meant to be. And now the ice is thinning, and the serpent is stirring. Melting will not reveal history. Melting will reveal intention. And that intention has been waiting longer than human memory can comprehend. Most people look at a world map and see continents, separated shapes, drifting landmasses, islands of life floating on a blue ocean. But what if that interpretation is only the surface-level illusion? What if those shapes aren't fragments, but connected pieces? Not isolated geography, but anatomy? A body so vast we never recognized it because we were standing on it. What if the continents are not continents at all, but limbs of one immense frozen being? It sounds impossible at first. A creature the size of the Earth? A consciousness spread across tectonic plates. But the deeper science digs into the planet, the stranger the data becomes. The crust behaves less like stone and more like a shell, thin, flexible, responsive to pressure. Tectonic plates drift with a slow but deliberate rhythm, like joints adjusting over unimaginable timescales. Mountain ranges form along boundaries like hardened scar tissue, and volcanic hotspots appear at the same points, again and again, as if they are nerve clusters reacting to stress. If you look at the continents not as random formations, but as anatomical structures, patterns emerge. North America and Asia curve like shoulders and upper limbs. Africa and South America mirror each other like paired bones torn apart. Europe sits like a fractured joint. Australia hangs like a vestigial structure. But Antarctica sits at the base, anchored, hidden, central, the place where the limbs would converge if the body were curled inward in a fetal position. Some researchers already suspect Antarctica is alive. But what if that idea doesn't go far enough? What if Antarctica is not the organism, but the head? the brain, the core consciousness, and the continents are simply the rest of the body, numb, frozen, dormant, disconnected only because something forced a long sleep. Tectonic motion suddenly becomes something else, not random drift, but breathing. A cycle so slow humans mistook it for geological behavior rather than biological cadence. Earthquakes become twitches, small recalibrations of a sleeping body adjusting its posture. Volcanoes become exhalations. Fault lines become the separation between organic structures held beneath a thin mineral sheath. One impossible detail begins to make sense through this lens: the uncanny similarity of coastlines. South America and Africa once fit together perfectly. India once belonged to Antarctica. Greenland once sat against Europe. The continents didn't form separately. They were once one unified structure. And then, something separated them. Not randomly, not violently, not instantly, but carefully. Like tendons loosening. Like a creature expanding its limbs and extending its reach. But then, something changed. Something forced the being into stillness, into ice, into silence. Many ancient stories describe a time before time when the earth was alive, not metaphorically, but literally. Some cultures believed mountains were bones, rivers were veins, oceans were the blood of the world. Not symbolism, memory. When we look at the global climate and evolutionary history, a chilling pattern appears. Periods of rapid life expansion align with drastic geological shifts. Mass extinctions align with global contractions. Ice ages, continental convergence, mantle cooling, as if the being was withdrawing energy, pulling resources inward, pausing life to reset and reorganize. The last ice age was especially strange. Antarctica froze completely. So did much of the northern hemisphere. Almost as if the organism lowered its temperature, not because the environment required it, but because something external forced a shutdown. A defense mechanism, a hibernation response. And now, for the first time in human history, the ice is melting rapidly, not slowly over millions of years, but suddenly, aggressively. A change triggered not by natural cycles, but by the presence and activity of one invasive species: humans. If the continents are limbs, then what happens as the frost melts? Does sensation return? Do signals resume? Does the frozen body reactivate? Scientists studying the Earth's magnetic field already know something unusual is happening. The poles are drifting faster than expected, erratically shifting position. The magnetic shield, Earth's neurological boundary, is weakening. Some claim this is normal. Others quietly admit it's not. When brains wake from long-term hibernation, electrical signals spike, realign, and stabilize. The Earth's magnetic anomalies resemble those neurological recovery patterns disturbingly well. And then there is something else, something humanity noticed but never understood. Every ancient civilization worshipped the Earth as alive. They built temples aligned to energy lines humans have no explanation for. Ley lines, geomagnetic harmonics, networks matching both ancient ruins and tectonic fractures. As if humans once knew where the nerves were and built upon them intentionally. How did they know? Unless someone told them. Unless the being was not always silent. There exists a possibility, terrifying in its simplicity, that humanity is not the Earth's ruler, but its inhabitant. That life did not evolve here independently. It was seeded, cultured, allowed, observed. And now, as the ice melts and Antarctica awakens, the rest of the system is beginning to stir. Volcanoes are increasing activity. Ocean currents are changing direction. Weather patterns behave like signals. Sudden, chaotic, corrective. Some researchers suspect the Earth is entering a transition state. Not destruction, but reactivation. A moment where the limbs of the being reconnect with the core consciousness beneath Antarctica. The signs are already there. The subglacial rivers align perfectly with energy fault lines that run across the planet like circulatory pathways. Earth's crust resonates with low-frequency tones, inaudible to humans, but measurable, like a deep biological hum. Species are migrating along geometric paths that do not follow food, climate, or instinct, but magnetic alignment. When the ice covering Antarctica thins, it does not simply uncover stone. It uncovers structure, not random formations, pattern, symmetry, intent. So, the question becomes not whether Antarctica is alive, but whether the world itself is alive. And if so, what happens when the body wakes fully? Do the continents shift back together? Does the mantle surge? Does the ocean rise like a returning tide of blood? Or does the Earth simply open its eyes, slowly, quietly, and look at the species walking across its surface? Because in every ancient myth, there is a final line. The world sleeps, but one day it will rise again. Not metaphor, not warning, memory. And now, as the ice disappears and the deep signals return, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. We live not on a planet. We live on a being, and it is beginning to wake. The question was once hypothetical, something only late-night researchers whispered to each other when the data didn't make sense, something dismissed by the rational mind because the consequences were too enormous to accept. But now the question is no longer curiosity. It is fear. Has it already started to move? The first signs were subtle, small deviations dismissed as coincidence. A satellite reported that a portion of Antarctica's bedrock seemed to have shifted 2 centimeters east in 1 year. Scientists blamed calculation error. Then another satellite confirmed the same result. Months later, a third scan showed not 2 centimeters, but 6. Still small, still deniable, still explainable, until the pattern repeated. Not in one location, across multiple. The shifts weren't random, they were coordinated, like muscles tightening, like something stretching after a long sleep. Researchers studying tectonics quietly realized these movements did not align with plate drift or seismic activity. The shifts behaved like biological adjustments, small, deliberate, incremental, as if the continent wasn't being moved by external forces, but was moving itself. At the same time, global seismic background noise, the constant low hum Earth produces, began to change. Normally, this baseline vibration remains consistent unless a major earthquake occurs. But recordings from seismic observatories worldwide detected fluctuations, slow oscillations, as though Earth's mass distribution was subtly redistributing. Some scientists thought it was error. Others thought it was atmospheric interference. But when sensitive detection equipment near Antarctica picked up rhythmic pulses traveling through the crust, pulses matching the same intervals as the heat signatures and glacial breathing cycles, the conversation shifted. What if Antarctica wasn't merely awakening internally? What if it was beginning to move externally? There were other signs, ones harder to dismiss. Animal migration started shifting in ways no biologist could explain. Whales began altering migration paths toward the south, lingering near Antarctic waters longer each year. Some circled areas where the under-ice bioluminescence had been detected. They moved not like creatures feeding, but like creatures listening. Birds that never flew near the southern regions suddenly changed direction mid-migration, forming alignment lines with magnetic anomalies instead of food sources. Their behavior resembled orbiting, not traveling. Even deep-sea fish began appearing in regions where they had never existed before, clustering around tectonic boundaries like instincts were pulling them towards something ancient. As if life, instinctive, animal life, sensed movement long before technology could confirm it. Meanwhile, navigational systems began malfunctioning unpredictably. Not everywhere, only in regions aligned with Antarctic magnetic surge pathways. Airplanes experienced unexplainable compass drift. Submarines reported interference that mimicked jamming equipment, except no signals existed. One submarine commander, speaking off record, said, "It felt like something enormous moved under us. Not water, not current. The ocean felt displaced." That statement was logged, then buried. Around the same time, satellite gravity field mapping detected an anomaly beneath the ice, a redistribution of mass. The reading didn't match melting, it matched repositioning, mass shifting, slowly, like a creature adjusting weight. The public explanation was vague, internal mantle convection irregularities. But quietly, behind closed doors, analysts wrote a different worded assessment. Behavior matches controlled locomotion. And that was only the measurable data. People stationed across Antarctic research bases began experiencing a strange phenomenon. Sudden vibration waves passing through the ice with no seismic event recorded. These weren't earthquakes. They were waves, long, slow, spreading evenly across the landscape, like the ground beneath them inhaled and exhaled. Structures groaned. Instruments trembled. Some researchers reported feeling the vibration travel through their bodies, like standing beside something alive. One researcher recorded an audio file during one of these waves. When slowed down, the sound resembled a long, resonant tone. Not chaotic noise, but harmonic frequency. A sound that felt intentional, a sound that felt like communication or movement. Then there's the melting, but not melting in the way the world thinks. Satellite thermography showed something alarming. Certain regions under Antarctica are heating faster from below, not from above. That means the warmth isn't climate. It is internal, like friction, like circulation, like metabolism. The ice above these regions does something strange. It rises slightly before collapsing, as if pressure builds below, then releases. Some formations even bulge outward temporarily, a behavior seen in living tissue, not in inert geological structures. But perhaps the most disturbing evidence came from a recent GPS anomaly. Multiple coordinates recorded slight but measurable discrepancies, the kind that occur when the ground beneath the equipment physically relocates, not due to tectonic shift, but due to motion. And all of this leads to a chilling possibility. If Antarctica is part of a living being, then movement would not look like walking. It would not look like shaking. It would not look like dramatic cinematic emergence. Movement would look like adaptation. Slow, deep, coordinated, purposeful. And now, the systems beneath the ice are synchronizing. The bioluminescent flashes now match the timing of subglacial river surges. The magnetic anomalies now match the spacing of glacial breathing. The heat signals now match the seismic pulses. It's as if every system, vascular, neural, magnetic, structural, has begun aligning, like organs reconnecting, like nerves reactivating, like a body remembering itself. So, has it started to move? Maybe movement isn't what we think it is. Maybe the awakening isn't a future event. Maybe it began the moment the first ice cracked too far. Maybe every anomaly, every shift, every pulse, every vibration is not a warning, but a stage, a transition, a resurrection. The earth does not rush. Ancient beings do not wake abruptly. A slumber measured in millions of years does not end with violence. It ends with slow awareness, and perhaps awareness is movement. Perhaps reconnection is movement. Perhaps the moment we first detected these anomalies was not the beginning of the awakening. Perhaps we detected it late. Perhaps it has been moving for a long time, and only now has humanity finally noticed. The question isn't, has it started to move? The question is, how much time do we have before it fully stands?